Okay, welcome to this presentation. I originally gave it at the Mormon Scholars in the Humanities Conference in May 2023. It reflects a bunch of research I've been doing on the Mormon Esperanto Society, or Por-Esperanta Mormonaro. And there's going to be a paper coming out at the Journal of Mormon History that I wrote on this subject next year sometime. But if you won't really want to see it, you can email me and I will send it to you. Anyway, this is the beautiful logo of the Mormon Esperanto Society. And you may be wondering, what is Esperanto? So for the non-Esperanto knowers in the room, it's a language that was constructed to be easy to understand and promote international brotherhood and peace. And it was created with the idea of helping people to cooperate and to get to know each other better and, pass over language barriers. And it was created by Ludovico Zamenhof. He was a Russian Jew living in Poland, so he saw firsthand the difficulties people encountered when they insisted on speaking their native language. People spoke Russian and Yiddish and Polish, and he thought, it's not fair if we decide, everyone has to speak Polish or Russian or Yiddish. And so he thought, what if we had a neutral language that was everyone's second language that we could, meet in the middle on? That's part of the how he decided to create Esperanto. And you can see some of these ideals in the Hymn of Esperanto, which is still sung today, called La Espero. And in the fifth verse, I've translated it into sort of Mormon-y language for purposes of this presentation. On the cornerstone of a neutral language and mutual understanding, the people will make by common consent one eternal family round. So you can see, if you're a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, some of the sort of overlap between Zamenhof's ideas for this international language with Joseph Smith's idea of we'll be of one heart and one mind that are spoken of in the Book of Mormon. Just a little more information on Esperanto as a language. One of the ways that they're able to make it so it's easy to learn is that they generate words from root words. So here you can see the flower is called floro. A big flower is a florego, a little one is a floretto, a bunch of flowers together is a floraro, and you might be thinking, aro, I've heard that word before. Yes, it's part of the name of the Mormon Esperanto Society in Esperanto, Por-Esperanta Mormonaro, so it's like a collection of Mormons. So a more literal translation would be Mormons for Esperanto. And this illustration comes from an excellent children's book in English called Dr. Esperanto and the Dream of a... I'll put it in the description. And here's another example of a primer in Esperanto, so you can see sort of how simple the language rules are, at least in the beginning. And a lot of the words come from Latin roots, and Zamenhof, he looked at the words in different languages and tried to choose the ones that were shared between multiple languages, like ombrello is the word for umbrella, chapello is the word for hat. There should be something, familiar for anyone who speaks European language, although it's more heavily on the Latin languages side. And you can see the endings here, like signoro muso estas la patro. You can see all those ones that end in o are nouns, and the os is the verb. And in normal Esperanto writing, they don't put in all these little hyphens, but they did it here so you could see the parts of the words and their roots. Okay, anyway, that's enough about Esperanto language. You can learn a lot more about it on other places online, and also through Duolingo. It's very popular, and Learnu. Anyway, so this is an article about Esperanto that appeared in the Young Woman's Journal in May 1911. That's one of the periodicals published by the LDS Church for young women. And another early mention of Esperanto was in 1933, when John A. Woodsoe, who was president of the European Mission at the time, he asked the first presidency if he could publish proselyting materials in Esperanto, like a few brochures, and they gave him the go-ahead. But with the start of World War I, it's doubtful that he ever actually printed them, and I haven't been able to find them. But if you did, please tell me. Okay, so we are transitioning to who's involved in the Mormon Esperanto Society in the 1980s. So Robert Blair is one of the key actors in the Mormon Esperanto Society. He founded the linguistics department at BYU, and he liked to use Esperanto as a starter language in his classes. So he taught Esperanto in his linguistics classes to teach students how to learn a language. And he also gave a presentation called International Communication in Esperanto, where he suggested that people could use Esperanto as a tool for missionary work beyond the Iron Curtain. And at that time, in the 1980s, there wasn't a lot of interaction between Eastern Europe and Americans. It was sort of discouraged by both countries. But Esperantists are very international. They're happy to make pen pals with people who aren't from their same country or even region. So his ideas sort of, as you'll see later, inspired the Mormon Esperanto Society. He also wrote about his experience teaching Esperanto in China in the Mormon Esperanto Society magazine. I just thought that was really interesting. So next up is Paul Cairn. He was a student of Dr. Blair, and he founded the Mormon Esperanto Society. And for him, Esperanto publishing was kind of his starter publishing language, because he went on to, he was like the leader, the regional director. I don't remember the exact language, but he helped with non-Book of Mormon translation for the European region and later for the whole church. And so him publishing the Mormon Esperanto magazine for 10 years was sort of like his trial run at that, which taught him so much about, finding content to put in your magazines and translating it and every aspect of it, because he also did the printing. Okay, and this is a little article that appeared in the Daily Universe, the BYU student newspaper, where Paul Cairn said that Esperanto is one of the few bridges between East and West. So you can tell that they were deliberately using Esperanto as a way to communicate with people in countries where missionaries are not allowed. And here's a picture of the Mormon Esperanto Society. I think it was in 1980. They're so cute with their little Esperanto books and flag. And I'd love to hear more if you know any of these people. Here's Paul Cairn with the president of UEA at the time, and you can see they're holding these toy crocodiles because in Esperanto, to crocodile, krokodili is to speak your native language when Esperanto is more appropriate. So part of Esperanto culture is always saying, ne krokodilu, don't speak your native language. This is an Esperanto area, and we're speaking Esperanto here. This is amazing, okay? Because I read that the Mormon Esperanto Society had published the correspondence wanted in the Daily Herald, the Heroldo de Esperanto, the Esperanto Herald, and I was having the hardest time finding the Heroldo. I was like, where am I going to find this? It's not digitized online. I was searching everywhere. I was like, maybe I could go to the Esperanto Museum. But it turned out that my own library, the BYU library, had copies of it. So I did have to do the old-fashioned way of searching where I actually read through all the issues. Well, I skimmed to look for, and I eventually found this, the first appearance of the Por-Esperanta Mormonaro in the Corresponde Desiras section of the Heroldo, and they later put in more ads about where they used the Esperanto translation of the Articles of Faith, and this one is the fourth Article of Faith. You can see, we believe that the first principles and ordinance of the gospel are, first, faith in the Lord Jesus Christ, second, repentance, third, baptism by immersion for the remission of sins, etc. And then they say, who are we? Write to the Mormon Esperanto Society. And That was this picture of the Heroldo de Esperanto. It's just to show you like what the newspaper looks like. It came out more than once a month. It says right here the Play Ofta Internacia Gazeta. So it's the Esperanto newspaper that had the most frequent publishing. And this is Man's Search for Happiness. I'm not going to play it now because you can just go onto YouTube and see it. But this is the heading of the Esperanta Mormonaro magazine. And Osvaldo Villanueva, who did the voiceover for Man's Search for Meaning in Esperanto, he also did the art and he designed the logo for the Esperanto magazine and the Mormon Esperanto Society. And they were able to get Esperanto materials on the official church distribution materials. I think this was like 1982. I have to check my research paper to double check that. But they included these forms in their magazine to encourage members of the Mormon Esperanto Society to order these Article of Faith cards and the Sonbendo, the recording of Man's Search for Happiness, from the church distribution center to show that there was demand for them. But unfortunately, most of the people who wanted these materials had already ordered them from the Mormon Esperanto Society, so the church distribution no longer offers Esperanto materials, unfortunately. This is just to show sort of this combination of Mormon and Esperanto culture. So the words here say, Alvoku heimen, la linio al via patro estas ciam libera. It just says, call home. The line to your father is always free or open. And, I'm like, I think I heard that in some kind of Mormon ad in the 1990s. But, yeah, I don't know, it's so Mormon and so Esperanto at the same time. And the same with this article by Dennis Asbury in one of the early Esperanto Mormonaro magazine articles. You can see this one's in English and Esperanto, but after about the third or fourth issue, all of the articles are in Esperanto. This one, though, it puts forth this idea that you can teach Esperanto to your children as a way of obeying Joseph Smith's commandment to study and learn and become acquainted with all good books and with languages, tongues, and people. And again, very Mormon and very Esperanto at the same time. I think that's so interesting. And then this is sort of like a perennial Mormon question. What do we call ourselves? If you're not Mormon, you might be like confused by all my terminology. It's a question that comes up a lot. Mormon is sort of the nickname. The Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints is the technical name. And it's a perennial issue. So next is Book of Mormon translations into Esperanto. The Book of Mormon was translated into Esperanto, and Edward Dembski in Poland started it before there was even a Polish Book of Mormon. So he translated it from the German version of the Book of Mormon, and he did it all as sort of like this passion project, and he put it on this thin typewriter paper, and there were shortages of everything in Poland at the time, and he wrote to the Mormon Esperanto Society asking them for supplies and money, and they sent him money so that he could buy food, and also they sent him typewriter paper and ribbons so that he could finish his translation. And even so, Edward Dembski was an experienced Esperantist, but he was not a native English speaker, so unfortunately even though his translation is like very Esperantish in some places, he didn't have the access to the same Esperanto resources that we have today, like concordances and corpi, to see what's the most common word people use for sins or something. He had to sort of just guess, and that was a weakness of this translation, and they decided not to publish the whole manuscript because the Mormon Esperanto Society was hoping that they could get a better one. And Edward Aki, he was not a member of the church, but his ancestors were, and he was an editor of the British Esperantist. He volunteered. Actually, did Paul Cairn ask him? I should look at the correspondence again. Anyway, he agreed to translate the Electitae Chapitroi, the selected chapters of the Book of Mormon. And I put in this page from his correspondence because it just shows like how concerned he was with individual words, and how that was like an important problem. So I need to teach you a little about Esperanto so you understand this problem. So if you put ido on a word, it means the child of. So a shafo is a sheep and a shafido is a lamb. So what do you think they called the Nephites in the Book of Mormon? How should they translate it? Should they just say Nephidoi, Nephido? But he says here in this letter, sed ancau Nephido povus signifi ne fido in Esperanto. So he's saying, if we say ne fido, that could mean like unfaithful. So, that's something you have to think about when you're translating something. And he was very concerned with these questions of like trying to align the language with the Bible, which was already translated into Esperanto and things like that. So this translation that Edward Aki did, that was edited by Paul Cairn, was a bit more professional, and they published it in issues of the Mormon Esperanto Society magazine, although they didn't publish. I don't think they were able to publish the whole thing. They didn't have enough room, but they did at least the title page and the first couple chapters of Nephi and parts of the translation as they came out. The Welsh Book of Mormon was also published periodically, but for a different reason. That one was published periodically to make it cheaper to buy individual parts of the Book of Mormon, month to month. It was the Mormon Esperanto Society published theirs periodically because that was the main way they had of distributing their materials. And the actual complete selected chapters were they were not published far and wide. There was actually only like 50 copies were published by Charles Hall when he went on a genealogy trip to Eastern Europe in like 1990, and that's on the next slide here, but that's not all that important. So Charles Hall was the president of the Utah Esperanto Club, and he was very involved in work in genealogy, and he did a bunch of genealogy work through his Esperanto connections in Eastern Europe. The Mormon Esperanto Society also published these brochures in Esperanto. The Testimony of Joseph Smith, the Church Organized by Jesus Christ. Here's the inside of the Church Organized by Jesus Christ. So you can see that they tried to include the pictures and everything too. And this is like the crowning jewel of the Mormon Esperanto Society, in my opinion. Paul Cairn's father-in-law was Crawford Gates, who was a famous Mormon composer, and he was able to get Crawford Gates to compose a hymn, and William Auld, the only Esperanto author to be nominated for a Nobel Peace Prize for his work. William Auld wrote the lyrics to this Esperanto hymn, which was called The Fulfillment, like the fulfillment of the hope that we read about earlier. So here's the music, and at the end of one of the verses it says, I just translated it in my very unskilled way, peaceful cooperation is possible without shadows of suspicion, incomprehension, or verbal barriers. In the dawning of the world, our ardent flame is not feeble, but already shines constantly as a sign of a miracle. And you can find recordings of this on YouTube, and I'll put that link in the description. And just as a little bow on the ending of this, in 2001, the National Esperanto Convention, the Lambda Congreso, was held in Salt Lake City, and Charles Hall was one of the main organizers of it. And their theme was Esperanto makes the world a family, which I think is adorable. And thanks to Lee Miller for sending me this. And here's the photo from that Congress. And I also looked to see if if interest in Esperanto continued at BYU. Because after Dr. Blair retired, I was like, well, did they keep teaching Esperanto? And there was one professor who taught like one class of it, and but I looked at, this wasn't the only page of checkouts. You could see tons of checkouts of these books about Esperanto going through the 90s. And Dirk Elzinga, he's one of the linguistics professors now who teaches the constructed languages course. He says that he teaches about Esperanto in his linguistics class today at BYU. So people are still studying Esperanto at BYU, and there is a BYU Esperanto club. But it doesn't have quite the there isn't like a monthly magazine for it, so interest kind of died down when Paul Caron had to do other stuff. So that's the end. Thanks for watching.